I'm sure that it's going to be a good show, and so happy that Mourinho is not leaving that show. It's important to remark that Messi has played 1,000 minutes less with Barcelona than a year ago.
For Messi at the age of 31, approaching 32, to be playing that much less football than he was a year ago, you know, that's dreadful for United fans to hear.
It's terrifying for United fans.
He's feeling some pain anyway. He's not completely fit.
Messi playing with pain is better than most footballers anyway. So.
That's a good headline.
Hello and welcome to Goals Preview Show. I'm Jay Legate, and today on the agenda we have the UEFA Champions League quarter-final between Man United and Barcelona. First leg takes place at Old Trafford, and we're joined by our correspondents from both teams. Kris, Voakes, our Man United correspondent. How are you today?
I'm very well, Jay. Thanks. How are you?
I'm actually all right. Thank you for asking. And Ignasi, fresh from Manchester Airport. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Not changed since the last time Kris asked me, so yeah, we're all good to go. I'll actually start with you because when Barcelona realised that Man United were the opponents off the draw, what was the feeling? What was the feeling like at the Nou Camp?
That it was going to be a tough game. The feeling it was that the Champions League is going to begin against Man United, in the sense that it's the first champion that Barcelona is facing in these KO rounds. They played against Inter in the group stage, but right now the feeling is there's no margin mistake. It's for a long time that Barcelona is not playing there, and it's going to be so hard. And Barcelona is having some problems you have seen in the last games, and even if they haven't lost in this year, they were so close many times. So plenty respect on Man United.
So there's a bit of trepidation there. Same question, what would it be like at Old Trafford when they heard that it was Barcelona?
It was just, everybody was fascinated and excited, I think, more than anything. They realised that they're playing with house money now, because really they should have been out against PSG, 2-0 down from the first leg, going away from home. This is a bit of a bonus. They're not expected to win, but then they weren't expected to win in Paris either. So in terms of positivity about getting through, you know, I think they'll see how the first leg goes before they start to consider where they are in terms of a possible Champions League tilt.
And looking at the fixtures that we've got in this round, this is where it's starting to get exciting, like you said. This is, like you say, where the Champions League begins.
I agree, and we can't forget that Man United has catched out many important teams in that Champions League. They seem to be a soft team at the beginning of the season. It was catching out Mourinho, and the team began to work so good with Solskjaer, and nobody is thinking, especially remember what happened a year ago in Rome, nobody in Barcelona is thinking it's going to be easy. This is Man United, and Man United, it's never an easy team.
That's probably the worst thing that United could hear, because they would want Barcelona to take them easily, because they realise that Barcelona on the top of their game is going to be really difficult for United, particularly at a time when they're not in great form, United.
Yeah, I mean, Solskjaer's just been appointed full-time manager. He's had 2 games in charge. What's been your perspective so far?
There've been probably 2 of the least convincing performances under him in the whole kind of 3.5 month stretch. I think the high intensity of the way that they play under Solskjaer is catching up with them a little bit. They look a lot more tired, a lot more leggy of late than they did early in his reign. They seem to need a pre-season under their belts, but I think the fact that this comes after a 7 or 8 day break since their last game against Wolves actually helps them in a way, because although there was an international break recently, obviously most of the United side are in international squads, so we're away playing. This will give them an opportunity to reset a little bit, and obviously you don't need to particularly get your players up for a game against Barcelona. It's going to happen naturally. So I don't think we can necessarily judge them by the last 3 or 4 results when it comes to predicting how this game would go. But yeah, certainly they come into it not quite as high as they would have been, say, straight off the back of the win in Paris.
You mentioned earlier about the form that Barcelona are currently in, and if you look on paper, 1 defeat since January, and that was in the Copa del Rey. What are the holes in their performances at the moment?
Well, it's true that they lost against Levante and Sevilla at Copa del Rey, but those were controlled defeats. I mean, both were in the first game of of a KO round, and in the second game, Barcelona won both games. In the second one, they scored against Sevilla. They scored 6 goals. An amazing Messi once more. But I'm a bit upset because it is true that having Messi keeps you relaxed because he's the best in the world. I think there's no discussion about that. But we can't forget that he hasn't showed a good level in the last 5 years. And Barcelona is not being able to win without their goals. In 2019, Barcelona has only won 2 games without Messi's goals. Both against Real Madrid, that's true, 5 and 4 goals they took. But only against a very bad Real Madrid, they have been able to win without Messi's goals. I mean, without Messi, Barcelona is a vulgar team. Not a bad team like others, like Real Madrid, has no leadership without Ronaldo, but without Messi and without Pique in defense, Barcelona gets terribly lost. So if Manchester United goes on in the plan of covering Messi, they could hurt seriously Barcelona.
Because I mean, you look at the rest of the team on paper, you take Messi out and they're not by any means on paper like a mid-table side. They're a championship contender, incredible players in that team. So what, aside from obviously the goals, is it just the gravity of his personality that's holding it together?
It's the gravity of their quality, I would say. And we can't forget that he hasn't played with the national team this season. Remember that he left with Argentina after the World Cup, and he was back only a week ago for playing a single game against Venezuela, which was a defeat. I mean, Messi has 1,000 minutes less than a year ago and 7 games less with Argentina than a year ago. We're speaking about, moreover, even himself has accepted to be on the bench many times this season, just waiting for this moment, for the Old Trafford game. And I think that it's something very important to take care of. Even if it is true that Valverde says that La Liga is the most important thing, Barcelona won Champions League this season. It's from 5 years they don't reach the semi-final. This is the Messi era, and nobody understands this bad performance of Barcelona since 2015.
That's a perfect handling of Messi as well, and because, you know, we've been saying for years, but what about when there's a slowdown of Ronaldo or Messi? And, you know, for Messi at the age of 31, approaching 32, to be playing that much less football than he was a year ago, that's the way you're going to get the most out of Messi at this age and beyond. And so that's perfect handling of him, and you know, that's dreadful for United fans.
Yeah, that's terrifying for Man United fans.
He's feeling some pain anyway. He's not completely fit. He has some kind of pubalgia. But well, you have seen his numbers.
Even
in the last couple of weeks, it's not really slowed him down, is it? Really,
Messi playing with pain is better than most footballers anyway.
Indeed. So. Indeed. For example, let's speak about basketball, the NBA. Good Chicago Bulls depend on Michael Jordan. It's exactly the same. Of course, if you have that player, you have to use him. The main problem of Barcelona is very often Messi is used so far from the rival's goal, and that doesn't allow him to be decisive in the last meters. It's not the same Messi beginning the action than Messi finishing the action. And if there are no Iniesta, no Xavi, and no other players able to fit him, things could be so difficult to Barcelona, especially against intense teams.
So thinking about that from a Man United perspective, how can they exploit that? How can they isolate Messi, or is it possible?
The difficulty for United is they are not particularly when players get into pockets of space. Nemanja Matic has done pretty well for the most part at United, but in terms of his defensive qualities, he's not necessarily the best in the centre of midfield. And United's defence at times has been kind of comical, some would say. They seem to have got something of a partnership going between Smalling and Lindelof for the most part under Solskjaer. But whenever somebody does get into those pockets of space between the midfield and the defence, they seem to have more trouble. How they've combated that normally is they've sat quite deep and hit teams on the counter-attack, and that's been brilliant for their attack because it's given them space to run into space themselves. But you know, most teams in the Premier League, for instance, don't have a Messi to sit in those pockets and make space for themselves in the way that Messi can. So that's the big question for United. How do they deal with that? Normally, under Jose Mourinho, it would have been somebody like Ander Herrera employed to just follow him around everywhere like he did with Eden Hazard a couple of times.
Can he not do
that? He could, but then there's a certain balance that he has supplied in the midfield, which has made United a better side in the centre of midfield. And if Herrera is going to be spending 90 minutes on Messi's shoulder, then there's space for the other great Barcelona players. Like you say, they've got great players besides Messi. There's going to be far too much space given over to them if that happens. So that, in taking Messi out of the game almost, you're giving Barcelona far too much space elsewhere. So they've got to be really careful. It's a really delicate balancing act.
Thinking about another aspect of Man United's midfield, obviously Paul Pogba has, since Solskjaer has come in, has been the number one guy, but has been a bit off of late. Like you mentioned earlier on, players are a bit tired. Is it just that he's tired, or has he been a bit distracted, do you think?
I think probably a little bit tired, but also United, I'd say Pogba's not played particularly well since like the beginning of March or something like that. Certainly not since after that PSG comeback when he was suspended. The games that he's played since then, he's not really affected that much. I think that's partly because United had kind of hit onto something before then. They were in a real vein of form. They were playing with that balance in midfield that I was talking about with Herrera on the other side, and he was doing a lot more of the legwork that allowed Pogba to play higher up and give him freedom to attack whenever he wanted. I don't think they've necessarily had that quite as much. I think Pogba is one of those players that other things have to be there in place for him to be able to succeed. He's not like a Messi who can make a match turn by himself necessarily. He has to have everything else in place for him. And those things haven't quite worked because there's been a legginess about them, because United haven't quite been effective in other areas. And certainly he's not been quite as high in his game as a result. And I think if United can get those opportunities where they are hitting Barcelona on the break and Pogba's got room to run into, then he can be a real danger. But it's just not happened for him of late.
Can I ask you a question about Solskjaer? What's the perspective of him outside of the UK? Because he's got a bit of, especially in the Champions League, he's got something about him, hasn't he?
I have a very personal opinion on Solskjaer. I think it was the perfect choice for Man United because I can appreciate that team uses to work when they have a massive presence of local players or players which deeply know that club. Of course, Solskjaer is a Norwegian footballer, a Norwegian coach, but he was playing for the United more than 10 years ago.
11 years. Yeah.
Indeed, he perfectly knows that club. And I appreciate that there are, again, a lot of youngsters in that team which they make me to feel that this is a trustful project in the long term, which make me to remember these Beckham, Scholes, Giggs and older generations. I think Man United is very similar to Barcelona in that aspect. They must have an important local players present inside the team, and with Solskjaer and the roster they have, I think they are completely in the good way, in the correct way, definitely.
You mentioned earlier about how much of a draw the Champions League is going to be for Barcelona to win this season. Obviously, they have a bit of an advantage in La Liga anyway. For Man United, the race to finish in the top four has changed. Slightly darker clouds have loomed in the last couple of weeks. Does that mean that the priority has kind of shifted back to the Premier League maybe in their mind, despite the kind of the glitz and the glamour of wanting to win the Champions League?
If you speak to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, it's like there is no priority. Every game you go out to win because that's what Man United do, and that's his answer to pretty much everything. United go for everything because they're Man United. He's going to go for it in both competitions. Looking at the draw further ahead, you know, there's a possibility of Liverpool next, and he's already rallied his troops for one game against Liverpool when it was against all odds. They managed to get a draw at home. So he'll see a possibility of getting through the draw to the final if they can get beyond Barcelona. So I don't think he'll rule it out. I think realistically the top four is still their best possibility though. That said, given their recent results, Solskjaer himself has said they need to win 5 of 6. He's probably about right. You know, some pessimists might say he needs 6 out of 6 and then a bit of luck. But I think there's still going to be twists and turns because we've seen an inconsistency in the other sides that suggests at least one of those spots should be open. So I think, yeah, they've still got to go hell for leather in the league. They've still got to host Man City and Chelsea. So it's by no means a done deal there either. But yeah, I'd say the top 4 remains the most probable route to Champions League football next season. But, you know, I'm not predicting anything in the Champions League after Paris.
That was going to be my next question. What do you think is going to happen in the game? You say you're not going to predict anything.
Well, actually, to be fair to me, I was saying at halftime in Paris that United were favourites from that point, just because of, you know, the way that the tension was starting to build in the stadium at Parc des Princes. I'd seen this so many times before, their team blowing a position that didn't seem possible. You know all about that, of course. But no, I do think United will be quite cagey at home. I think the way that Solskjaer has spoken, he won't go hell for leather at home, really kind of thinking that's their only opportunity. He'll back them to do something away, and so therefore I think it might be quite a tight home leg. I think United are capable of getting at least a draw, but then it's just about whether they can then pull it off at Camp Nou.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Ignasi? How's it going to go?
Well, I have to say that I'm happy on seeing Man United again on the top 8 in Champions League, but I'm sure that it's going to be a good show, and so happy that Mourinho is not leaving that show because
he'll be so disappointed.
Well, disappointed. Barcelona players probably are disappointed because remember that 5-0 against Real Madrid. Well, Mourinho is a coach which brings good memories to Barcelona's fans.
He's got a lot of
but
history
thinking
with you
on the
guys.
show, I think it's going to be much more playing without Mourinho, especially for Man United as well, for what we saw before. I'm not sure about Barcelona's chances against Man United, I have to say, because you mentioned Paris, I mentioned Rome, but again, last time Barcelona went to Paris, it was a weaker PSG than this season, and they did a ridiculous game. Man United was able to do against a better PSG an amazing game in Paris. Well, Barcelona is stronger.
Has that game scared Europe a little bit, the way Man United played?
Maybe it's the Catalan attitude. I really don't know. It is true that Barcelona has won all finals played against Man United, 2 in Champions League, 1 on the Cup of Cups many years ago when this trophy was existing, but on the KO rounds, always Man United had a victory. So it's a historical game, I think. And I'm pretty sure that Man United wants to have some vendetta from the last 2 finals. I still trust in Valverde, but if Man United is able to isolate Messi, to close him on a jail, I think that half of the round it's going to be in favour of Man United, or more than half of the round.
I do feel like the 2 finals, the 2009 and 2011, those were the 2 occasions when Sir Alex Ferguson was kind of out of ideas. I think that was they were the 2 moments when he really kind of was hoping that his side could get past an opponent, but didn't necessarily believe that they had what it took. And that very rarely happened during his reign, particularly from kind of 92 onwards. I think, you know, it's a different Barcelona, it's a different Man United now, but yeah, I think that there's an element that you want a bit of payback, but also, you know, being back in Camp Nou 20 years on from the 1999 final,
yeah, there's a
bit of symmetry, there's a bit of magic about it. And also, if you think back to 99, that amazing comeback against Juventus, people thought that was the kind of once-in-a-generation result, and then they went and did pretty much, well, something even bigger in the final, if you like, scoring 2 in injury time. You know, we'll have to see if they can do it again in Barcelona.
Can they indeed? We'll find out. Kris, thank you so much for coming in today.
No worries, thank you.
And Ignasi, thank you so much for coming over as well.
My pleasure, thank you, Jay.
I hope you both enjoy the game.
I'm sure.
Hope so.
And I hope you guys do as well. Don't forget to hit the bell icon in the corner so you can get updates of all our latest previews and all the other things that we're doing on a weekly basis as well. Enjoy the game and have a great evening. Bye-bye.